newcomer from Norway who arrives here will be surprised indeed to find in the heart of the country, more than 1,000 miles from his landing place, a town where language and way of life so unmistakably remind him of his native land. Svein Nilsen, Norwegian-American, journalist, May 14th, 1870. In the last half of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s, more than 800,000 Norwegians immigrated to the United States. Norway's economy was poor and it was difficult to find work. Many had heard that there were unlimited possibilities in America. The final wave of Norway's immigration occurred from 1900 to 1910, but large numbers continued to come right through the 1930s. The upper Midwest became the home for most of the immigrants. Norwegians became the new Vikings of the West and presented themselves as an ethnic group with wholesome rural values and ideals. Among these was a 16-year-old youth, Harvey Mathison, who arrived in America in 1911. Several members of his family had settled in the west central area of Minnesota, and they encouraged him to come over. His aunt contributed the $60 fare for his transportation. He worked a year to pay this fee back to her. He was to be the only one from his family who stayed in America and whose descendants made Stevens County, Minnesota, a permanent home. Soon after his arrival, he settled in Sinnis Township, Stevens County, to farm. He married Emma Erickson, and they would have 5 children. On February 2nd, 1927, the second child was born, a son, Harvey Alvin Mathison. Harvey thought his father was a pretty good old dad, who nonetheless could be strict and accepted no nonsense. Harvey worked with his dad, milking cows, feeding pigs, and learning the farming business. He and his older brother Merle were to work side by side and take care of the farming when the parents went by ship back to Norway for a visit. Harvey, at age 7, headed off to country school, not convinced that that was the course of action he wanted to take, but with a strict nudge from his dad, Harvey realized it was what he had to do. This was the introduction to a philosophy he would live by all his life. Do what has to be done and don't make a fuss about it. Harvey walked the 2 miles to School District 24 until 8th grade. Then he entered Alberta High School, and this time he rode a bus to school. High school was a different sort of experience with many teachers and many students, 19 in his class alone. Harvey became a well-known athlete playing in 3 sports: football, baseball, and basketball. The Alberta Blue Jays football team was particularly successful, losing only 1 game during Harvey's sophomore through senior years. Harvey earned an honorable mention at the state level. But sports were not the only activity. Harvey tried his talents in the junior class play. Graduating with the class of 1945, this notation appeared under his yearbook activities: a mother's pride, a father's joy. Other skills were gained as an active member of the Snappy Scots 4-H Club. This 4-H club he would later resurrect when his daughter Vicky became a 4-H'er. Then it would be known as the Scott 4-H Club.
We're gonna tear down the mailbox, rip up the floor, smash...
Harvey graduated in 1945, the same year electricity became available, and as Harvey put it, the world lit up. It lit up in more ways than one. By mere chance, Harvey met a young woman, Florence Hellberg, better known as Flossie, at the Lakeside Ballroom in Glenwood. Harvey had asked a girl from the West Central School of Agriculture, but she decided to turn him down. She was too nervous to tell him herself, so she sent her friend, Flossie. Harvey then asked Flossie out instead. He remembers,
I asked her to dance, and later asked to give her a ride home. She wouldn't let me, though. She said she didn't know me well enough.
the romance was not to truly bloom for 10 more years. Their grandson, Talek, who interviewed Harvey for a class project, found out
he was scared to death when he first met Flossie.
But they were meant to be together, and in 1955 they married in the Anias Church in Swan Lake, followed by a reception at West Central School of Agriculture, where Flossie was the food supervisor. They were married for 52 years. During the time he met Flossie and married her, Harvey had enlisted in the Army. It was the Korean War, 1951 to 1953. After basic training, Harvey became a grease monkey, working in the motor pool at Fort Riley. He also built bridges and provided hands-on inspection and repair. His natural handiness and reliability proved an asset in the military. He earned the rank of corporal and a certificate of proficiency for completing the engineer equipment mechanic course, and he gained lifelong leadership and technical skills. Although he volunteered twice for active duty in Korea, a medical issue with his knee prevented him from serving overseas. In 1953, after his military stint, Harvey turned his attention to serious farming. He married Flossie, and they together bought a house in 1955 and a farm in 1962. They raised oats, corn, beef cattle, and pigs. Flossie was by no means idle in this enterprise. She raised chickens, and her egg sales, as for so many farm families, paid the grocery bills. According to Harvey, she was a hard worker and helpmate on the farm as she hauled and unloaded corn for more than 20 years, raised all the hens, and slaughtered and dressed the chickens. They farmed together from 1955 to 1995, when they retired to Morris. Harvey experienced many changes during his farming years. He regarded the arrival of hydraulic power on the farm as one of the most important advances in agriculture. Hydraulics revolutionized what had been sheer, hard, physical labor. Harvey reflected in an interview with the Sun Spotlight for the Morris newspaper,
I know change has been necessary, but still, it would have been nice if the family farm could have survived. There used to be 3 or 4 farm families in every section of land. Neighbors used to thresh together, fill silos together. You needed your neighbors in those years.
That neighborliness was a creed that Harvey practiced his whole life. Helping others became a characteristic he was well known for. On the family side of events, daughter Vicky was born in 1956. Harvey put on a new identity, that of father, sharing with her skills and activities, supporting her in 4-H and school events. He notes how empty the house was when Vicky went off to the University of Minnesota, Waseca. Vicky's time with her dad as an only child on the farm was memorable in many ways.
I did chores a lot of the times because I had livestock for 4-H, but one of the things that a big memory I have is when Dad would be combining, and he'd be out in the field all day and get home at dark, and of course he was full of dust, and down to the lake we'd go because we lived right on the shore of Lake Hattie. So we'd grab the ivory soap bar because that floated, and a lot of times you were just swimming by moonlight. And probably my most favorite memories are the 2 trips to Norway. We went there in December of 2002, and we're actually there for New Year's Eve, and Tori and Talek were with. And that was the first time I had been to Norway.
Vicky married Howard Dosdahl on December 24, 1981, and the arrival of twin sons Talek and Tori in 1989 completed life for grandparents Harvey and Flossie.
Well, that was the highlight of their life, is having twin grandsons. And I've always said it was good that I had two, because then they each had one. I was going to name one, and Howard was going to name one. And Howard came up with the name Telek for a county engineer, which turns out the name is Norwegian. And we came up with Tori when it was two boys, and that worked out well, both T's, both Norwegian names. And when I told my dad that we had named one of the boys Tori after his dad, the tears kind of came running from everybody. Mom and Dad babysat a lot. I don't think my dad missed a football game, a concert, 4-H, judging, any activities that the boys were in, he was there.
Harvey was committed to family and farming, but others looked to him for help and leadership. He grew up as a lifelong member of Trinity Lutheran Church in Alberta and served in many leadership roles. Membership in the Alberta Wildlife Federation brought him shoulder to shoulder with wildlife artist and conservationist Ernest Strube. This led to many interesting conservation projects in the Scott 4-H Club, where he and Flossie were leaders while Vicky was a member. Harvey was a charter member of the Alberta Area Improvement Corporation. He served as club commander in 1973 to 1974 for the American Legion, Post Number 29. One of his longest-standing volunteer services was for the Stevens County Fair Board, where he was swine superintendent for 4-H and served 30 years, from 1975 until 2005. Harvey was instrumental in initiating the annual 4-H livestock auction, which is known to help 4-H youth cover the expenses of a project with animals. For many years, his ever-gentle nature with the youth and his helping hands with the livestock justified the naming of the newly erected show arena at the Stevens County Fair, the Harvey Mathison Livestock Show Arena. His leadership on the Scott Township Board ran for 23 years to provide the means for quality of life. Harvey also had a special interest in the Frog Lake Cemetery. Family members were buried there, and the cemetery was kept neat and tidy by his many years of effort. Connected to his interest in farming, in 1968, Harvey began work in seed dealership. This he continued for 34 years. Asgrow Seed Company named him an outstanding salesman for his work in crop improvement. This homegrown Minnesota boy maintained an interest in his Norwegian roots his whole life. His travels included 5 trips to Norway, where he has 13 first cousins still alive. He liked to cook and swore he liked, no, even loved lutefisk, saying, "Lutefisk, really? We have it quite a few times a winter. I cook it." As pancake chef extraordinaire, he made hundreds of them for the Sons of Norway breakfasts. Maintenance was important to his quality of life. He gardened, swept, mowed, hoed, and painted, including the unique caboose on his daughter Vicky's property. He fished for fun, especially with the grandsons, and danced a jig or two when the mood or opportunity presented itself. Life is never free from natural or personal disasters. In 1939, at the age of 12, a tornado swept through the farmyard, destroying everything but the house. Harvey was astonished the next morning when he saw the destruction. He had slept through the whole thing. The largest earthquake in west central Minnesota was on July 9, 1975. Harvey felt it when he was standing on a ladder. It was a 4.6 in strength. Flossie thought the water heater had exploded. Harvey's personal health concerns began in 1986 as a survivor of cancer. He had both knees replaced, and in 1990 he was shaken with a diagnosis of leukemia. Harvey soldiered on through these difficulties with his usual courage and fortitude until, on September 12, 2007, his life ended. His funeral was held at Faith Lutheran Church in Morris. Others remember Harvey as
He is a motor that never quits.
Hardworking, helpful, just always there for all of his family.
Harvey's own assessment of himself: I'm a simple person. I like things plain, but well kept. This Made in America man contributed all that he could to his life in Stevens County. At the same time, he remained a true Norwegian American by birth, with a continued interest in the Norwegian American heritage and his Norwegian ancestry.